a lot of people are hesitant about getting into hand tool woodworking because they think it takes a lot of skill, or at least a lot of practice, to develop that skill. And I'm here to tell you, that's hogwash. I mean, people look at a dovetail, a tight-fitting dovetail, and they think, well, I'm going to have to cut 100 of those to get even decent at them. And it's one of those things, it's a mental block, because all a dovetail is a few key components. If you can learn to saw a line, if you can learn to chop wood with a chisel, then you've got all the skill you need to cut a dovetail. Everything else is purely academic and layout and design. And you can find opportunities to practice those two skills, chopping and sawing, everywhere. So there's no reason you couldn't just jump into a project and practice the skills you're going to need in that project within the project itself. And that's something I'm going to show you today. We're going to cut a slot, something really common in furniture, especially in entry-level furniture. Just cutting out a square to fit another square into it. And I'm going to show you all the different opportunities you have to improve your skill level in that most basic of joinery. So in cutting this slot, which a slot is basically just in the middle of a board, you cut out two little squares so you can slide one board into the other. At least that's why I call it a slot. And we're going to make a gap so that this board will fit into this board. And it is a long grain cut, so it's not like doing a dovetail, which is generally into end grain, where you're having to saw down and then cut across the grain. We're going long grain, so we're going to have to be dealing with splitting action and stuff like that. So one of the things we're going to work on is how to read the grain really, really quickly. The other thing are sawing techniques. And I'm just going to be using a simple gent saw. And because it's very hard to get a flat blade saw across the wood right there, we're also going to be working on our tool that's derivative of a saw, the chisel. So we've got a simple board right here. You can pretend it's a leg and you're having to do a stretcher in between legs, or a box and you're putting a brace on the bottom, whatever. It's just a simple board. You see lots of different examples for it. I'm going to drop it into my vise real quickly, and I'm going to mark a 90-degree spot, because for this example we're going to do it at 90 degrees. And once again, I like to use a knife for doing stuff because I have poor eyesight and it's a lot easier to feel it. I can actually feel that little indentation. So I come back over here, I put my knife in my block, I register this right there, and now I can mark this angle very easily. Can't get a perfect fit, then taking it right off the other piece. For the depth, I'm simply going to do the redneck layout tool of a pencil, dropping the board on it, flushing it up, and drawing my baseline. Do that for both sides, just to make it easy. Now, because this board I'm putting into it is a perfect 90 degrees on both sides, we do have to get it down to a perfect 90 degrees. So I'm going to use my layout tool, and I'm just going to mark a layout with a knife on the two ends. And really, I don't have to do this side. I'm just doing it simply so that you can see it on the screen. Just do the side that you've got to work. So I've now got my layout, and I'm going to pencil in this knife line right here so y'all can see that edge. I'm going to leave the other side. I have not marked it. Now, nothing I've done has been overly complicated. It's just layout, and you would have to be doing this with power tools or hand tools. It's just slightly different, but it's all design application. What people are concerned with is the skill of cutting stuff, and that's not that hard. Right now, I have only 2 cuts that have to be dead on perfect. But I have all this waste material in the middle. And it's always best to sever fibers whenever you're planning stuff like this, because it'll be easier to chisel out the waste when you're getting the bottom. So we're going to have to be sawing it anyways. So might as well use that as a practice slot. So when I have students, what I'll do is I'll tell them to draw a bunch of 90-degree lines. I'm only going to do about half, because I would do this exercise in the middle of a project when I know I've got to do a lot of cuts anyways, and these two outside cuts are the ones that count up. Now if you're trying to learn how to saw straight and plumb at 90 degrees, the first thing you need to do is make sure that this is fairly flat. And you can do that visually, just kind of eyeballing it. Us humans are very good at determining that. Or I have my great-grandfather's level, and if it's absolutely critical, I might come over here and just tap it down until it gets plumb. Why is that important? Because a saw is a lot like a broom. When you balance it on your hand, you can balance a broom very easily if the weight is up high. Well, if the weight is up high, you can feel it if it's wanting to tip one way or the other. And whenever it's balanced, you know it's plumb. So you hold the saw at its balance point. And another thing is that allows the saw to do most of the work. There's no reason you should have to put pressure down on a saw. Whenever you're doing that one, yeah, you are increasing the speed, but you're also increasing the likelihood that things are going to go wrong. Because a saw will cut straight as long as you don't get in the way. So what you can do is come over, just place the saw where you want to start, find its balance point, and start sawing. Come down to your baseline, right it up. Hey, I was a little bit off there, so the next time I come over, try it a little bit easier. Follow my line a little bit better. Oh, yep. There you go. And just do that a few times all the way through. And it'll give you lots of practice to come over here. It is also a good joinery technique. So right now, I'm to the point in my sawing application where I no longer have the lines. But because I set the body motion and got everything comfortable in this way, I should be able to saw lines this coming across. So stop, reset, regrip, come over, reposition, and get yourself at 90 degrees. And how I'm doing that one, I'm looking at the reflection of the saw. Now I do have a classroom series on the saw and all these sawing techniques that you can go to. This is just a few of the highlights. So I come over, I'm sawing along. I'm getting a feel for how fast I can move the saw. I'm getting a feel for how much pressure it takes to start the saw. How many strokes it come across the front. How many strokes it comes down to the side. I'm just getting a lot of practice in. And basically, a little less than a minute. So now I come to the two important cuts. I got this side and I got that side. So I should be able to saw these a lot more confidently. Take my time. Come down the base. Right it up and I should be fine. This time I'm on the other side. I can use my fingernail as a fence. Line it up. Get it going. Come down. Right it up. So out of those two important cuts, I got a lot of opportunity to practice in addition to you doing proper joinery techniques to remove this material. But I want you to know something. The grain direction is kind of coming at an arc right here. Remember in a previous lesson I told you we always want to lay the grain down, lay those fibers down, because if I were to come in directly this way, a crack might develop and it would want to follow that grain direction down. So if I could somehow come in this way, well, even if a crack develops, it's going up into my waist area, so I don't have to worry about it. So it would make sense that I would want to come in this way to lay the fibers down. But if I keep coming this way, there's a good chance I would get blowout on this side right here and I wouldn't have a nice clean cut. So I've got to come in this direction some. So analyzing this grain, what would you do knowing that you had to come in at least a part of the way in this direction? Well, if you think about it, if I were to come up directly this way or even higher at a certain angle, I will be laying those fibers down. Whenever I want to get rid of these fibers, it might be advantageous to crack the wood coming in a little bit this way and then finish it up coming the other direction. And you'll have to trust me, but you might be able to see this grain is running almost parallel, but not quite. So by visually looking at it, I can't quite tell if it will crack going down this way or crack coming up that way. So I'm going to have to do that one by feel. So real quickly, I grab my chisel. Notice I'm doing the flat up so that the angle is going up, so I can get an increased angle right there. I'm going to come off my line a little bit, and also notice how I'm holding my mallet. You see, most mallets have a handle, and if you grab them by the handle, you can get a lot of momentum going. But a lot of mallets are designed so that you can hold them in your hand this way, so you can have a lot more control of the momentum. So I'm going to come up a little bit in front of my line, tap it, and then come down to that line, and just break those fibers up a little bit. Now, obviously, if you have a bigger chisel, you can make this go a little bit quicker, but I've got my 1/2 incher, and I'm grabbing it as close to the edge as I possibly can and still maintain control. I'm just going into that slot and creating broken fibers coming up. Flip the board, and now we can start taking bigger chunks. Once again, bevel going down to start it, just because I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Boom. Notice it broke going up, so I was right about the grain direction. Then just keep coming down. This shouldn't take, but about 30 seconds. You have somebody across the shop, you can throw those shavings all the way across that. Bevel goes up now, so I can bring the angle down a little bit more. And there we go. We're taking bigger pieces off. But I want you to see something. Notice how the few times the fibers started to break off, because I put that little indentation, that's where my chisel was the first time. So it never went below the line, even though the grain got a little bit away from me. That's what that relief cut will do. So I know I need just to be a little bit more careful on these. Even though you can see the grain coming this way, it did snap off. And that could be because I severed the fibers down here, so there was the weak angle. Now once again, you can see that that grain is almost horizontal. I don't really know if I'm going uphill or downhill here. So now that I got this waist right here, I can practice with my chiseling skills. Come up in and just start feeling it out in the center section. I know that as long as I don't go past this bevel down here, I'm not going to be at my line. So just start doing some planing cuts to gain some practice. See, it cracks ahead going this way, so it makes sense to start on this side and work my way going across. Just focusing on not going past the bevel on this side, and pretty soon you will have a completely flat base, all based upon chisel skills that you're practicing. Okay, so let's see how it's going to fit. Come over, grab your board, let's tap it down and see how bad the gap is. Not too bad. It holds its own weight. That's about all I can hope for. So, in the course of the 2 or 3 minutes that we've been working, we have not only done a joint, but we practiced the elements of creating that joint within the joint itself. It's like inception, so to speak. Plus the fact we had to read the grain constantly. And that's practice for any kind of woodworking you do. Just a quick look at the side, figure out what's going to be going on, decide how you would attack the situation to get everything just perfectly smooth. So there you go. The basic techniques for cutting a slot in the middle of a board to fit another board, but more importantly, practice of techniques that you would be using for cutting mortise and tenon joinery, bridle joints, or the dreaded dovetail. So for today's bonus, I want to talk about Curtis Buchanan. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce his last name, but he is one of the preeminent Windsor chair makers in this country. I mean, people like Schwartz and all them turn to him for advice. And he has probably been on YouTube longer than any of us out there. But a lot of his original videos, I mean, really condensed aspect ratios and stuff like that. And it's not the traditional education that you're finding nowadays, because the format was just coming out. But he has some playlists that are just incredibly educational for me and entertaining. And I've been watching this really long series he's done on making a Windsor chair, from actually the process of going out and selecting the raw logs to how he splits it, and everything he's doing is very attainable. It's reachable. I could see how I could do the process. It's slow paced, but it's, you know, watching one video before going to bed, I mean, it puts you to sleep, but it's relaxing in that way. And you wake up with your mind just going after all the things that you could possibly be doing. So I'll put a link down to his channel. I highly suggest checking out that playlist on how to make a Windsor chair. I mean, I'm enjoying it.